I'm Alma. Standing in the opulent military ballroom, surrounded by the gentle hum of conversations and the soft strains of the military band, I was suddenly jolted back to the past. There he was, Ryan Thompson, my ex-fiancé, looking me up and down with that same smug smile I remembered from 9 years ago. "You're still just a paperwork clerk," he sneered, and then let out that infuriating laugh. For a split second, I felt like that broken woman again, the abandoned bride everyone pitied. But then, I took a deep breath and remembered who I'd become. I'd rebuilt my life, piece by piece, and I wasn't going to let him shatter my newfound confidence. My family background was far from glamorous. I grew up in a small town, the daughter of a hard-working mechanic and a schoolteacher. My father was a gruff but kind man, always ready with a practical solution to any problem. My mother was the emotional rock of the family, with a gentle heart and a knack for making everyone feel loved. 9 years ago, my life was on the verge of a new beginning. Ryan and I were set to get married the next morning. The wedding was supposed to be the start of our happily ever after. Friends and family had gathered, and my wedding dress hung in the guest room, a symbol of my hopes and dreams. But as the evening wore on, Ryan didn't answer his phone. At first, I wasn't worried. Maybe he was busy with last-minute preparations. But as hours passed, my stomach tightened with anxiety. I called and texted, but there was no response. Around midnight, my father came to my apartment. He tried to be calm, but I could see the worry in his eyes. "Have you heard from him?" he asked. I shook my head, and his gaze shifted away. That look scared me more than anything. At 1:17 a.m. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Alma, I'm sorry. I can't do this. Lily and I are leaving together. Please don't contact me." That was it. Our years-long relationship ended in less than 20 words. The next morning was a nightmare. Guests and family members arrived, and the air was thick with awkwardness and pity. People whispered and stared, and I had no idea what to say. My father had a panic-related medical episode, and seeing him in the hospital bed because of Ryan's actions broke something inside me. The wedding and the reception never happened. My future, which I'd been so excited about, vanished overnight. That night, I checked into a cheap motel outside town. I sat on the edge of the bed, wearing sweatpants and an old army t-shirt, with mascara stains on my face. The room smelled of stale air and industrial cleaner, and I ate crackers and soda from the vending machine, wondering how my life had gone so wrong. In the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Terrible thoughts crossed my mind. Maybe Ryan was right. Maybe I wasn't interesting, pretty, or important enough. Maybe I was just the woman behind the desk, unnoticed by everyone. But the next Monday, I went back to work. Not because I was strong, but because I didn't know what else to do. My desk was still there, and soldiers still needed help with their pay issues, missing records, and other paperwork. So I focused on my work. One task at a time, I kept going. I learned that in the Army, paperwork was more than just forms and spreadsheets. It determined whether a soldier got promoted, a family received housing allowance, or a widow got benefits. I took my job seriously, staying late at the office and eating from vending machines more often than I'd like to admit. A young captain once made a snide comment about me being the admin lady, but I just smiled and gave a witty retort, which made the sergeant next to him nearly choke on his coffee. That was the first real laugh I'd had since Ryan left. Over the next few years, I applied for the warrant officer program. The first time, I was rejected. The review board said I had potential but lacked leadership experience. I was devastated, but I didn't give up. I asked what I needed to improve and took their advice to heart. I volunteered for all the difficult tasks no one else wanted, like fixing broken systems and handling messy audits. I learned logistics and took night classes. I even finished my master's degree while deployed, writing papers at 2 a.m. with bad coffee and a noisy laptop. One winter, there was a helicopter accident that affected many soldiers from different units. I was part of the team that dealt with the aftermath, handling the benefits, travel records, and casualty support for 47 families. A 60-year-old woman grabbed my hand and said she didn't understand the paperwork. I told her I'd stay until she was okay, and that moment changed me. I started to see my job as a place where I truly mattered. A year later, I was selected for the Chief Warrant Officer track. People who used to call me the paperwork girl started calling me ma'am with more respect. Then I met General Henry Lewis. It was during a personnel and logistics reform project at Fort Bragg. He was a quiet, focused man who listened before speaking. I'd written a long report about readiness failures, and he actually read the whole thing, all 42 pages, including the appendices. He sent me an email, saying my analysis was clear and my recommendations were practical. He invited me to a working group meeting. At the meeting, he asked me real questions, not the kind men ask when they've already made up their minds. After the meeting, he walked beside me and said, "You don't waste words." I replied, "I work in personnel, sir. Wasted words become bad policy." He smiled and said, "Fair point." Months passed before he asked me to get coffee. I almost said no, but his simple and honest invitation, "No pressure. I just enjoy talking to you," made me change my mind. That was the beginning of my second life. Back at the ballroom, after Ryan's cruel remarks, I decided to stay. Partly because I refused to let him chase me off, partly because Henry was supposed to arrive soon, and partly because I was curious. I excused myself and went to the refreshment area. There, I ran into Lieutenant Colonel Emily Carter. We'd worked together on a personnel modernization project years ago. She told me that Ryan was having a rough year with his promotion board. Apparently, he'd been up for promotion multiple times but had leadership concerns. She also mentioned that I'd won an award for the Personnel Modernization Initiative, but I had no idea about it. I was still processing this when I saw Ryan step outside onto the terrace, arguing on the phone. I couldn't help but overhear fragments of his conversation. He sounded desperate and said, "I'm trying." I'd never heard him say those words sincerely before. Later, at a table, people were discussing leadership. One retired command sergeant major said Ryan was lucky to still be around. Another officer said he was smart but always took credit while others did the work. A retired brigade commander even mentioned that Ryan used to talk about an ex-fiancé, saying she wasn't leadership material and would never go anywhere. Just then, a female major sat beside me and told me that Ryan was terrified because the final promotion recommendation passed through General Lewis's command structure. The irony was almost too much to bear. Suddenly, there was a change in the atmosphere in the ballroom. People started looking towards the entrance. I knew who had arrived. General Henry Lewis, tall and calm, and with his dress uniform perfectly pressed, walked in. His eyes scanned the room until he found me. The moment he did, everything else faded away for him. He walked straight towards me, and Ryan's expression changed from confidence to confusion and then concern. When Henry reached me, he said, "There you are." His simple words made me feel like I was the only person in the world. He noticed that something was wrong and asked, "You okay?" That genuine question almost broke me. I nodded and said, "I am now." His hand rested gently on my back, a comforting gesture. Senior officers approached, and the conversation quickly shifted to me. A brigadier general congratulated me on the Readiness Award. Ryan, standing nearby, looked confused and uncertain. One of the colonels said, "Sir, your wife might be the only reason half our personnel systems still function." Henry replied, "I've been saying that for years." That's when I saw the realization in Ryan's eyes. He finally understood that people respected me for who I was, not because of Henry. Ryan approached me again. He said he had no idea I was married and that I looked happy. He even said I always deserved a good life, which was a far cry from his earlier comments. Then he made the fatal mistake of saying, "I guess Alma married well." A colonel beside me calmly said, "No, Major Thompson. General Lewis married very well." People laughed, and Ryan's smile disappeared. Others started sharing stories about my work, like how I'd saved a command from a readiness disaster and helped during a 3-day system failure. A retired military spouse also spoke up about how I'd helped her after her husband's death. Ryan stood there, frozen, trying to reconcile the stories with the version of me he'd carried in his head for 9 years. Finally, I looked directly at him and said, "9 years ago, you thought my value depended on who I knew. You never bothered to find out who I actually was." There was no yelling or insults, just the truth. As I watched him walk away, I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just a sense of freedom. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, an old military habit. Henry was asleep beside me, completely relaxed. I slipped out of bed and went downstairs to have a cup of coffee. I watched the city of Arlington wake up, and I thought about the woman I'd been 9 years ago. Henry joined me a little later. We sat in silence for a while, and then he asked how I was feeling. I thought about it and realized I felt peaceful. He nodded, as if he'd expected that answer. We went to a small diner for breakfast. While we were waiting for our food, Henry said, "I don't think last night was about Ryan." I was taken aback. He explained that the Ryan situation had ended years ago, and last night was about me finally realizing that. After breakfast, I was packing when I received an email from Lily Thompson. She apologized for what she and Ryan had done, saying she'd learned that character mattered more than status after her daughter's painful breakup. I replied, telling her I hoped her daughter would find her strength and that I'd found mine. As we drove home, I thought about how far I'd come. The greatest revenge wasn't about defeating Ryan or getting him to regret his actions. It was about becoming a version of myself that no longer needed his approval. And that was what truly set me free.